following podcast is not meant for children or for liberals, even though that's pretty much the same thing these days, but that's what we're here for. Somebody's got to keep these brats in line. Anyway, you've been warned. It's the right opinion.
These days, our media's either incompetent or malevolent. They don't believe in heaven, but they acting like they heaven sent. Knowing the truth is way harder than telling it. We gotta work harder, gotta be more intelligent. Sometimes we just gotta grab a mic and start yelling shit. We're living in times when it's hard to stay relevant. Be the elephant in the room full of elephants. Be the elephant in the room full of elephants. Boom.
All right, people, welcome back to another rousing edition of The Right Opinion right here on therightopinion.podbean.com. I, of course, am your host, Harrison Bergeron. Also, be sure to check this fine podcast out on Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes, and also most regular episodes are available on hackerhameen.podbean.com, as well as ratsaladreview.com. Check out both of those platforms. Hacker Hameen is conspiracy theories, professional wrestling, pop culture news, free thought, above and beyond pretty much anything and everything that there could be a podcast about. They have one over there, as well as Rat Salad Review, which has a litany of other podcasts as well, including The Right Opinion, but mostly rock and roll and metal review shows and things of the like, as well as some other miscellaneous stuff as they are expanding their horizons. And we thank both of those platforms for having the moxie to share The Right Opinion on their airwaves. But I'm here this week with one specific purpose in mind. I'm hoping this episode is short. I'm hoping it's sweet. I'm hoping it fills all of the gaps that were left by the subject of this very podcast, which just so happens to be John Oliver's breakdown of Medicare-For-All. He did this recently. It was like an 18-minute opening segment on his show last week tonight. A show, by the way, I used to watch frequently. Loved John Oliver when he was on The Daily Show. Liked this show when it first started. And full disclosure, ultimately, he went down the same path that all of these supposed comedians go down, and that is an unrelenting, merciless attack on our president, and seemingly never to the other side. Now, I will be the first to tell you, I appreciate a good Trump joke about as much as anybody. It's just when you get to the orange and the racist and the stuff that has been repeated ad nauseum and is only loosely based in fact. Well, the orange thing is sort of irrefutable, but all of the stupid things that all of these left-wing liberals, Hollywood elites, media people, all this stuff, they live so deep in their bubble that they are all convinced that the entirety of the country feels the way that they feel. And once Oliver went down the wholly uncreative and definitely unfunny Drumpf route, yes, he thought making fun of Trump, the best way to do that would be to misspell his name in some roundabout, stupid way. Drumpf is where he went. And so, as he went down that road, I went down yet another road to find myself other forms of entertainment that aren't so condescending. Now, John Oliver, again, can be funny at times when he's not doing this sort of thing. And the very nature of his show is political, so I'll cut him some slack, unlike the other supposed comedians that are out there doing late night shows like Seth Meyers and Jimmy Kimmel and all this sort of stuff. The one of those that I will give the slightest bit of credit to is Jimmy Fallon. A, because he had Trump on his show on the build up to the 2016 election. And B, I actually just heard Jimmy Fallon do like a monologue at the beginning of his show where he was making fun of Joe Biden. Now, if you're truly a comedian, and I know you hate Trump, and I get it, because I despise all of your political heroes, wouldn't you, extend that comedic skill to both sides of the aisle? God knows. And maybe to a certain degree, it's almost too easy to make fun of the current Democratic field. But my God, there's enough material there to where it should at least be touched upon once in a while, right? Joe Biden's old and crazy. Bernie's old and crazy. Elizabeth Warren's a fake Indian. Andrew Yang's spraying whipped cream in his supporters' mouths, who just so happened to be kneeling at the time. Sure, there was no sort of innuendo there. You've got a whole field of just batshit crazy people. There's no reason why comedians shouldn't be beating them over the head with their supposed comedy as often as they do with Donald Trump. But John Oliver, like I said, kind of all the caveats out of the way there. I was a fan. I'm no longer a fan. He's a comedian, but he's also got a political leaning. All of that now on the table. So John decided to break down Medicare for All this week, and as you'd imagine, his explanation is rather fact-averse, largely emotionally based, and doesn't seem to comport with reality. So let's dive in to some of the things that John had issue with our current healthcare system and that he thinks would ultimately be fixed by Medicare for All. He talks about 27.5 million Americans currently without insurance. Now, what John doesn't tell you is that those people have largely chosen not to have insurance, despite the fact that they, up until recently, were literally suffering a fine every year based on a percentage of their income for not purchasing that insurance. Now, one of the dirty little secrets about Obamacare, and it's really not that dirty, it's really not that much of a secret, it's actually the basis upon which Obamacare was implemented, is that if you cannot afford health insurance, and that means you're below a certain level of income, it's not just that, oh, I've got my iPhone bill and my Jordans I got to pay for, and I got this really cool car that I want. It doesn't look like I can afford health insurance. No, they break it down based on the poverty line. I believe the poverty line is somewhere, it's really low. It's like $12,000 a year, but there's multipliers. So if you are making anywhere less than 4 times the quote-unquote poverty line, which again is right around $12,000. So if you're making anywhere basically $45,000 or below, you get some sort of subsidy from the government. If you're below that poverty line, you get free insurance from the government. And then, as you work your way up that scale there, the subsidies are less and less because they know that you can afford it because, again, they're basing this off of your income. So those 27.5 million Americans have made the conscious choice to either prioritize the money towards other expenses and take the fine that they're going to receive from the government, which, to the best of my knowledge, is no longer in place due to court rulings that have deemed that mandate to be what it was and should have initially been designated, which is a fine, not a tax. Because if they're saying that you only pay said tax for not doing something, that's not a tax, that's a penalty. And the government does not have the right to hold you at gunpoint or, for that matter, hold financial burdens over your head for the purposes of making you buy stuff. This is a capitalist society, largely a free market economy. You cannot be forced to buy anything. Now, there are some regulations out there, but I believe they're on the state level that suggest like you have to have car insurance, you have to have, other things. Those are at the state level, which gives you the option to, if you don't like it, you can get up and you can move to another state where that's not the case. That's not what happens when they implement these sorts of things on a national level. And ultimately, like I said, the courts overturned the ruling that stated initially that it was a tax and it's not a penalty. It is a penalty. The courts have now finally figured that out and ruled accordingly. So 27.5 million people don't have insurance because A, they didn't want to go on to healthcare.gov and fill out the paperwork and get a subsidy and or free insurance, or B, they've just chosen to take that money that they've earned and they have the right to decide how it's spent and spend it in another way, despite the fact that the government, again, was essentially trying to force them to purchase health insurance. Then we get to the 43.8 million people that are underinsured. And this, again, is another issue that has been created or at the very least worsened by Obamacare because people now have to buy insurance, right? You have to buy it or suffer a fine. And the premiums were going up every year. In some states, up to 100% a year. Arizona, I believe, when Trump first got into office in 2017, the premiums had gone up 116% in Arizona. Now, obviously, that's an extreme case, but there's a litany of other cases all across the country where you're seeing double-digit and sometimes even triple digits increase as far as the percentage of premium that you're paying from year to year. So, as premiums go up, in order for you, a law-abiding citizen who wants to make sure that you have the insurance in place because the government has mandated that you do so, you will then have to purchase an insurance that is providing less coverage, higher deductibles, maybe copays, maybe other things aren't covered. Maybe it's just outright catastrophic coverage where the deductibles are by design super high because they're only really there in the event that you get yourself into a serious accident, you need a surgery, you gotta, whatever the case may be, something random that you don't foresee coming because you're in relatively good shape and there's no real reason to suspect that you'll have any health crises at any point in the foreseeable future. So you get a catastrophic plan. This is often common with young people that are essentially forced to be on this system again because of the way that the system was designed, was that in order to lower premiums on older people who have higher medical expenses because, you guessed it, they're older, they're more likely to get sick, they're more likely to have higher priced medical procedures done. Those people are paying an exorbitant amount of money because of the likelihood that they will require care. And so to do that, in order to lower those prices, they have to subsidize that with young, healthy people paying into the system who are never, or at least very unlikely, to require any such expensive care. And those premiums are being used to offset the premiums of the much older folks. So 48.3 million people are underinsured, which is funny because this is actually something that Trump talked about in the debates. As a matter of fact, I think I have the clip. Donnie, take it away.
You have deductibles that are so high that after people go broke paying their premiums, which are going through the roof, the health care can't even be used by them because the deductibles are so high.
Exactly. The deductibles are so high, you basically don't have coverage. Now, coverage is what an insurance is supposed to provide, right? So you have life insurance, for instance. That covers you in the event of your death. It makes sure that there's money that goes to your loved ones or your business or whatever you need to have money spent on that you would have been spending money on had you still been alive. The coverage is you apply for, let's say a 10-year term, you apply for $1 million in coverage, you get that coverage approved, you pay the premium, and for the next 10 years, if anything should happen to you, $1 million goes to your family. That's life insurance. Health insurance is supposed to work similarly because it is also insurance, where you pay a premium, and then should anything happen to you, you go to a doctor, you have to go to a hospital, God forbid something happens. Now they should be covering those healthcare costs, right? I mean, after all, what are you paying the premium for if they're not covering the cost of the care? But because of Obamacare and the fact that people were forced, essentially at gunpoint, to purchase insurance that they probably were having difficulty affording in the first place. And granted, a lot of these people had lifestyles in place once that decision was made for them. Hey, everything that you got going on? Yeah, it's time for you to rework your entire budget to make sure that you have this health insurance. Otherwise, we're going to fine you 1% of your income for every year that you don't have it. And that goes up to 2%, 3% every year. And eventually, thank God, the courts came around to this and got rid of that. But people were underinsured because these plans had extraordinarily high deductibles. They were forced to buy them. And so now, even for me, right? Like I'm a male in my 30s. My insurance premium personally is really not all that expensive. But without giving away too many numbers here about my own personal finances, let's just say hypothetically, I'm paying $500 a month for my life insurance, my health insurance premium. Let's assume that. So there's $500 a month. That's $6,000 a year that is now out of my pocket altogether, gone. That goes towards the premium for this health insurance coverage that I have that hypothetically, again, it's all hypothetical here, there is a deductible that is so high that unless I get into some sort of crazy accident, I'm never going to actually get to the point to where I hit the deductible, which means what? It means that I'm paying for every bit of my medical care out of pocket up until I hit that deductible. So let's say, again, I'm paying $500 a month. My deductible is, let's keep it even within reason. Let's say my deductible is $6,000. That means that I'm not only paying $6,000 in premium unequivocally, no way of getting around that if you want the coverage. So that $6,000 is gone. Now let's say I get into an accident. Something terrible happens to me. Car accident, something happens at work, whatever the case may be. Now I have to pay up to $6,000 before insurance will pay a single dollar. And I've already paid them $6,000 for the year, or I will by the time the year is out. Now I have to make another $6,000 worth of payments in order to even access this coverage that I was forced to purchase, that I have, that provides no coverage. See how that all works? So, underinsured, yeah, there's a lot of people who are underinsured. There's a lot of people who had to get the insurance, couldn't afford the ever-rising premiums, and so they had to take less and less coverage on the insurance plan that was probably costing them about the same from year to year. Because let's say, again, hypothetically, I'm paying $500 a month for Medicare, or for whatever this is, health insurance through the government. You're not really, through Obamacare, you're not really paying for it through the government. You're paying a private health insurance company, and the private health insurance companies, for all the talk about all the money that they were making before Obamacare, yeah, guess what? They're making more money than ever since Obamacare. So that whole notion of the insurance companies are making too much money and yada yada, yeah, they're making more than ever thanks to this cockamamie plan that Obama implemented. But so I'm paying $500 a month for my premium. I got a $6,000 deductible. Fair enough. All of that well and good. Now the next year comes along. Instead of paying $500 a month, I'm paying $600 a month. Maybe my deductible's now $10,000 a year. Now I got to scale that back, right? I don't have an extra $1,200 lying around in the budget to pay for the year. So now I got to take coverage that has an even higher deductible. Maybe co-pays are on the table, and I'm paying the same $500 that I was paying last year for even less coverage. The wonders of Obamacare. So, after Obamacare was a complete and utter disaster, because the healthcare system before that was terrible, so we were told, and then the Democrats said, well, we've got to fix it. They fixed it, and now here we are 8 to 10 years later, and they got to fix it again? Why would anyone in their right mind give the reins of power to these people after they so terribly screwed things up the first time around? So then John gets into some of the big criticisms about the Medicare-For-All plan. He gives you 3 big ones, which are more or less probably what I would say are the biggest issues myself. But John, as he does, poo-poos them, and then obviously talks about all of the wonders of Medicare-For-All. I'll be doing the opposite, and should you want all of John's takes, I encourage you to check him out. I believe the entire segment is on YouTube. As a matter of fact, I'll try and drop a link in the show notes for you. So the big 3 criticisms are cost, wait times, and choice. So he starts with cost. John admits right out the gate that Medicare-For-All is going to be expensive and is going to increase the federal budget. So even John and all of his spinnery that he's got going on here, he tells you right out the gate, this plan will be expensive and it will increase the federal budget. He also somehow tries to make the statement that it's going to reduce employer spending on premiums, which I guess would allow them to hire more people or give people raises, which is kind of funny to me because for some reason, this same logic doesn't apply when we give businesses tax cuts, right? So when Trump tried to cut the taxes for the corporations, which he did from 35% to 21% as part of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, 35% came down to 21%. What did you hear about in the media? Oh, boo, Trump, he's taking care of all of his millionaire and billionaire friends. Only the rich people got taxes and the corporations get taxes forever, but the people have to wait. And the ones for individuals are only until 2025 and yada, yada. Okay, but by your logic, John, the 14% annual savings that corporations saw in 2017 as a result of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, or maybe it was 2018 by the time it actually kicked in, all of that reduced the cost for employers, which should have allowed them to pay people more money and hire more people, which is precisely what actually happened, despite the fact that the news will tell you that, Trump was just taking care of his buddies. I don't know how many of you have been paying attention, but I'm pretty sure Trump doesn't have a lot of friends anymore. I don't know how you could possibly think that he's trying to help all of the same buffoons that run all the tech companies and all of the Hollywood studios and all of the things that have been doing nothing but trashing him for the last 3, 4, 5 years now. So the idea that, he's helping out his millionaire and billionaire friends, I'm sure he would have found a way to help out his millionaire and billionaire friends, specifically the millionaire and billionaire friends that he has, instead of giving everybody tax cuts so that Facebook can then save 14% of their overall corporate tax, so that they can then turn around and attack him or Twitter or the media, the varieties of media that there are, both social and old school. This was never about him helping his friends. It was about him kickstarting the economy in the wake of the slowest post-recession recovery this country has ever had. Thanks, Obama. Then we go to John Oliver's point, and this is the same point that Elizabeth Warren tries to make and the same point that Bernie Sanders tries to make, yet none of them have ever actually physically given us numbers. Bernie at least makes an attempt to on occasion, and actually Elizabeth Warren, to her credit, did give us numbers. It's just once you looked at those numbers, you realize how outrageous the cost actually is, and then the whole idea sort of becomes more silly than they're making it out to be. Particularly more silly than John Oliver's making it out to be. But with Bernie does like a little game of 3-card Bernie, I guess, a 3-card Monty, if you will.
It's like, well, I got 3 hats. I'm going to put your money under here. I'm going to put healthcare services under here. And I'm going to put nothing under here. But maybe it's a smiley face pin so that you'll feel bad, at least if you're a loser. So I'm going to shuffle these 3 hats on. Which one has the healthcare?
And no matter which fucking hat you pick, the healthcare is never there. Ever. Nor is your money. It's just a bunch of smiley face pins. He's a magician. I'll give him that. He's managed to convince the greatest, freest, most capitalistic society in the history of the world that communism is a good thing. So maybe he does have some superpowers. Who knows? But John Oliver talking about how, yes, your taxes might go up, but your out-of-pocket cost overall will go down. Again, another point that Elizabeth Warren tried to make and failed to do so miserably. Bernie, at least crafty enough to not quite put hard numbers on it because he knows that they'll never actually shake out in his favor. But what John doesn't mention here is that he doesn't mention this will ultimately raise not only the taxes for the wealthy, which is going to cause a problem because, the wealthy create businesses. They hire people. All of those things become more difficult when you raise taxes on them. Also, he forgets to mention the whole fact that the entirety of the private insurance industry would crumble, which would mean you're looking at hundreds of thousands of people without jobs. And he ultimately fails to really explain, while, yes, your out-of-pocket costs for healthcare might go down, your taxes are going to go up. And, oh, by the way, if you're healthy and you weren't really spending a lot of money on healthcare before, other than the exorbitantly expensive insurance that you were forced to pay for, now you're going to be paying for everybody's health problems as opposed to just your own. So if you're, somebody who eats right, exercises, does everything you can to reduce your personal healthcare cost, that no longer matters because you're going to pay taxes, and those taxes are going to pay for everybody's health problems. More on a similar note on that a little bit later on. Then Mr. Oliver decides to say just the dumbest thing you could possibly say when you're trying to make a point, is that nobody could really know. He says nobody could possibly know what these costs are going to be because there are too many variables. Well, then by all means, John, let's implement it and see how terribly it destroys our economy. He then gives us 5 examples of these 5 different supposed experts, none of which are named in the graphics that he shows, but these 5 experts that are supposedly estimating the overall savings or cost to the American people. If, of course, Medicare-For-All were implemented in 2019. So these were like the estimates that were put together based on calendar year 2019. And 2 of them said it'll save us money. 1 of them said it'll basically be no change in the amount of money that it'll cost you. And then 2 of the estimates show somewhere between $500 billion and $1 trillion extra per year that the American taxpayers, who are already $23 trillion in the hole, would have to face if this plan is implemented. But by all means, again, John, let's do the Nancy Pelosi strategy here, and let's pass it first, and then we can find out how dramatically it'll fuck our country up. Just like Obamacare, first time around. Thanks again, Obama. Then John continues on and says, yeah, it might cost a lot of money, but we will get a lot for that money. And he goes on to talk about the variety of different things that we'll get under Bernie's Medicare-For-All plan.
I wrote the damn bill.
Yes, we know. Shut up. Anyway, so there are a variety of things that we would get in this bill. We would get vision, we would get dental, we would get long-term care, which, by the way, long-term care, like you can die like in your 50s and never ever reap those benefits ever. So you will have paid your entire life into a system that you will never ever see a dime from. Furthermore, Bernie was one of the idiots who raised his hand when was asked if all of these benefits would be extended to illegal immigrants. So I'd love to see the math on how he's calculated how the United States is going to pay for the health insurance of 7 billion people on the incomes of, maybe 150 million. Good luck with that. I could tell you without running a single number, those numbers will never add up the way Bernie wants them to. And then, let's not forget about some of the other things that he would include in this plan, right? Birth control, abortions, sex changes for the mentally unstable out there. Why do you think, Bernie, for a second, that those are things that I should be spending money on? I don't take birth control. Do I benefit from it on occasion? You bet. Abortions, I don't pay for them. I don't encourage them. As a matter of fact, I morally abhor them and most certainly don't want my taxpayer dollars to go towards them. And I believe there's already legislation in force that says that that can't be the case, but that hasn't stopped us from giving money to Planned Parenthood all these years, so why the hell would it stop this? Then, of course, sex changes for the mentally unstable amongst us. If you're a boy who thinks you're a girl, guess who's paying for that surgery now? You guessed it, the American taxpayer. So, yeah, we get a lot for that money, John, but the thing is that because of most of the things that I could get, I don't want, I shouldn't have to pay for it. Yeah, we all need basic preventative care. Yeah, we're going to need a prescription for antibiotics once in a blue moon, a vaccination even if you are so brave as to do such a thing, maybe a flu shot if you're one of those nuts that thinks those are worth your time or energy. But you don't get to just take my money and spend it on all of these other things when I most definitely would be, and for that matter am, a better judge of how my hard-earned money is spent. Seems fair, right? Like, I mean, look, folks, if you think, oh man, there's people out there that could use the help, that's really good of you. There are these things called charities. Donate to them. St. Jude's Hospital. Don't donate to, 501c3 charitable organization unless you've done all of the research on how much of your money goes there. Donate it directly to the source. Donate it directly to a hospital. Donate it directly to a doctor's office. Donate it somewhere. Find places that give a bulk, if not all of the money that you're giving them to the cause, and go from there, okay? If you're so hell-bent on helping people, which I applaud you for the record. Don't make it sound like I'm poo-pooing the notion whatsoever. As a matter of fact, if the Democrats gave to charity as willingly as they want us to hand our money over to the government, all of these things could be solved already. But alas, rather than actually give money to charity, which obviously some of them do, but statistics have shown that they are, I think, 6 times less likely to do so, or actually give 6 times less money than Republicans do to private charities. So if you guys are also high and mighty, you guys are also morally wonderful, go ahead and put your money where your mouth is. Start a 501c3 charitable organization. Donate 90+% of the proceeds to one of these causes here to provide health insurance for people who can't provide it for themselves. That's great. That's how this should be done. Not Bernie putting a gun to my head saying you're going to pay higher taxes no matter what, even if you're not going to take a single ounce of medical services from the newly government-provided health care, you're still going to pay all these taxes, and that money is going to a variety of different things that you may not agree with, a variety of different services that you may never actually see or need. And then by the time that you do actually see or need that coverage, it's entirely possible that the government's going to decide you're not worth it anymore, as was recently exposed in a recent Bloomberg expose. I guess there was a little bit of a quote from Bloomberg talking about, look, if you're like a 95-year-old prostate cancer patient, we're not going to try and cure you. You're not working anymore. You're not pumping into the system. You've had a good life. You're well past life expectancy. You just go home and die now, and we're going to take all the money that you pumped into the system to go help younger people so that they could stay healthy, they can remain in the system, and they can continue to provide more money for us to spend stupidly because, that's just the way things go. So John, while making this point about all the great stuff that you're going to get, even he kind of makes fun of it in the segment when he says, in addition to health and vision and dental and long-term care and all the insurances that Bernie's going to provide you, he's also going to get rid of cell phone bills. He's going to get rid of flat tires. He's going to get rid of Geico commercials. Everything that you hate, Bernie Sanders' plan is going to fix. Now, John says that because he's trying to be funny, but the reality is that even John in that moment is sort of recognizing that Bernie Sanders is nothing more than the kid running for class president on the platform of free ice cream. That's who he is. It is the most simple of metaphors because it is so true, and Bernie, frankly, also so simple, much like many of his followers. So then John wants to talk about the savings on administrative costs for private insurance. Right, John, because the government is so much more efficient than the private sector. Oh, wait, it's not ever at anything? That's right. So John is probably just smart enough to know all this, and that's precisely why he didn't go to the hard numbers on this, because the hard numbers that are often cited when this particular argument is brought up about the merits of Medicare for All is that basically what the statistics show is that administrative costs per the amount of Medicare cost that is going out are lower under Medicare and Medicaid than they are in the private industry. Now, notice that I said it's the cost of administrative costs versus the cost of healthcare provided. Why is that important? Well, when you're talking about Medicare, you're talking about, again, old people who are more likely to use services and are more likely to have expensive procedures done. So, if this pool of people we're spending $1 trillion on, and this pool of people we're spending $500 billion on, if the administrative costs are the same, it's going to be a lesser percentage with the group that you're spending $1 trillion on, as opposed to the people you're spending $500 billion on. So when you're talking about private insurance, you're talking about young, relatively healthy people for the most part. When you're talking about Medicare, you're talking about old, sickly people who, again, are not only more likely to require the services, but are more likely to require expensive procedures be done. Hip replacements, all that sort of stuff. Hospice care, all of that costs a lot of money. So when you're comparing the administrative costs of Medicare to private insurance, you're talking about a much higher cost of health care under Medicare because the particular procedures and the frequency thereof cost a lot more money than would ever be spent in the private industry for younger, healthier people. And again, John must know this because that was an easy layup for him to go to that set of statistics that are always bandied about. But we all know that when you look at that, as I just explained, it doesn't really shake out the way that the people who quote those statistics actually say it does. So comparing the administrative cost for, let's say, the hip replacement for a 90-year-old to a quick stop at the doctor for some antibiotics by a 30-year-old is legitimately insane. And it's also, let's take into consideration that the government provides 3 weeks of paid vacation and a hefty pension plan to their employees, whereas that is most likely not the case in the private sector. So each administrative person that the government's going to need to now take on, and they're going to need to take on a lot of them, because right now Medicare only covers about 17% of the country, 17, 18%, let's say 20. So in order to get all of the administrative people on board to process 100% of the medical bills for all of the country, they're going to need to bring in 4 times as many people, all making good salaries, all getting healthcare coverage, all getting, well, I guess everybody's going to get healthcare coverage at that point, but all getting nice pensions, all getting 3 weeks paid vacation. And hey, since they are now getting health insurance, because everybody is, they may very well want more vacation or more pension money because they're technically losing out on some of the value of their job, because everybody's going to have free health insurance, supposedly free, in quotes. But these people had a really good plan before. Now they got the same shit as everybody else. They're going to want a little something extra to make up for that. And then, like I said, we're going to have to employ another 400% of people in the administrative field currently. So, like I said, that's the problem with the statistic there. It's like saying that the administrative cost for a Maserati is lower than the administrative cost for the percentage of sales of a Toyota, because you can buy 4 Toyotas for what it costs for a Maserati. So if it costs $100 to do administration for both, but you're taking that $100 and you're dividing it by 20,000 as opposed to dividing it by 100,000, yes, the 20,000 number is going to be a higher percentage of administrative cost simply because the good that you're selling is more expensive than the good that they're selling, as is the case with the private insurance and Medicare. Then John does what all good left-wingers do, and that's give you cute little anecdotal stories about a Utah health insurance company that apparently is flying people to Mexico to get their prescription drugs cheaper. That's, obviously an extreme and rare case that's actually going on. B, I don't doubt that any of that's true. I'm 100% certain that this Utah healthcare company that he was talking about is actually flying people to Mexico to get cheaper prescription drugs. I don't doubt that for a second, but I would put the blame on Obamacare. As I mentioned, rising premiums, rising costs of prescription drugs, a forcibly purchased premium at that. So now you have to pay for this premium where you could have been sacking that money away in the unlikely event that you did need a prescription. Now you've been paying towards insurance that, again, is providing you no coverage. Also, the price of prescription drugs had steadily been going up. Also, you got to take into account that the overall prescription drugs, there's more being written now than ever, which is a root of this problem that somebody should probably get to the bottom of. Trump's doing his best with the opioid epidemic, but there's a litany of drugs that are being overprescribed. The cost of prescription drugs as we are getting into the implementation of Obamacare was going up steadily, but they've increased significantly since Obamacare took over. And I'd be hard-pressed to imagine that that's a coincidence. So then he talks about how the government, having consolidated all of health insurance, would be a better negotiator because they'll have all of the buying power to be able to go to healthcare providers and say, you guys need to provide these services for lower rates. And John even recognizes in his segment that they can't set the prices so low as to negate any motivation for innovation. But he doesn't provide a solution, he doesn't provide a formula, he doesn't provide a percentage of acceptable profits that these companies can have, nothing. He just says they can lower prices, but they can't lower them so much that there's no incentive for doctors or for pharmaceutical companies or healthcare providers to innovate to be able to provide better care or more widely spread care at a lower price or better quality. There's no motivation to do any of that once you remove the profit incentive. Now, John must not be watching the Democrat debates because all of them have had an issue with, quote, for-profit healthcare, end quote, meaning that they want pharmaceutical companies, doctors, hospitals essentially to make no profit whatsoever. And I would consider that a disincentive to progress and innovation, as would John Oliver, but he didn't really say that out loud in his segment, despite the fact that he did at least acknowledge it. Good on him for trying to be intellectually honest, but I guess when you're spewing the positives of Medicare for All, it's really not a possibility to do that, because if you were intellectually honest, you would immediately know that this entire plan is nothing but a cockamamie scheme to try to win votes from losers who can't afford their own stuff. So, he concludes this particular segment by saying, and I quote, "You can definitely say it will be more expensive, but even if it is, I would argue that it's worth it," end quote. Cool story, bro. Like, go vote for Bernie in November. Your vote counts as much as mine. Let's try this whole election thing out, and let's see which one of us is on the right side of history. I have a feeling it'll be me. Then he sort of just poo-poos the whole idea that $32.8 trillion is enough money to be concerned about. That's $32.8 trillion. That's what Bernie says it will cost, which you can assuredly increase that number by, I don't know, at least twice what he says, but probably, let's go with the Elizabeth Warren number, right? She was somewhere in the neck of the woods of 54 million. Yeah, right. 54 million would be not that big a deal. $54 trillion over the next decade. That's what Elizabeth Warren had to say. But for the sake of argument, right, let's go back down to John Oliver's number of $32.8 trillion. That amount of money is the entirety of mini Mike Bloomberg's net worth times 522. It's actually more than that. So Mike Bloomberg, the 17th richest person in the world, and if you were to take him and his net worth and multiply it by 500 and tax them all at 100%, it still would not pay for 10 years of this cockamamie plan. And then we move on to wait times. So wait times. He immediately tries to trivialize the wait times, John Oliver this is, by saying that it's only some people for some procedures, usually non-life-threatening, perhaps even optional surgeries like a knee replacement. Because who needs a knee? You got two. Just hop around for a while. Can we interest you in a peg leg? It's the sort of health insurance that we're looking for. Anyway, so he says that people are currently waiting anyway here in the United States because they have to save up for procedures due to the cost in the U.S. Fair enough, I don't deny that that's even happening. But then he shifts, of course, to the most extreme of examples. He shifts to an organization that travels around these remote areas to provide free health insurance. Now, when I say remote areas, I mean remote areas in the U.S., although these people do travel all around the world. This is what's known as a charity, where somebody paid for these people to go to remote areas and provide health care to people who don't have it easily accessible to them. Now, I'm sorry, if you live in areas that are so remote that healthcare isn't readily accessible, that's sort of on you. Like, you can move to any other part of the country and there will be healthcare readily accessible to you. You can just go, there'll be a doctor, there'll be an urgent care, there'll be a hospital. But if you live like in one of the rare and extremely remote areas of this country, like that they don't even have internet, I'm sure you're not going to get very good healthcare there anyway. And, I'm sure your existence there is probably purely financial or economical, but that's really on you, okay? It's time for you to move the hell out of that area if you don't have medical care readily available to you, particularly if you have kids or, if you have a medical condition that might need immediate care. You should probably move closer to a hospital. And it might not be easy for everybody else, but the bottom line is that we are never, and The Rock means ever, going to be able to make life easy for everybody. This is something that the Democrats don't seem to understand. This is why all their policies include free this, free that, screw the rich, eat the rich, screw the babies, kill the babies. They don't have any slightest bit of sympathy for somebody just trying to start in the world or somebody who's actually achieved something in the world, but they have all the sympathies for their fellow losers who can't afford basic, goods and services that they need in order to live a productive life. So, again, after dismissing these real concerns by people as rare, he then takes actual rare circumstances and tries to paint them as the norm, where it's as if like the whole country are these remote areas where people have to line up for days to get health care out of the back of a pickup truck or whatever the hell was going on in this little clip there. John wants to make that the standard when we all know it's the rarity. It has nothing to do with 99% of people who have access to a hospital, an urgent care center, a doctor's office. All you gotta do is walk in. If you're direly ill, they cannot just turn you away, and you can pay out of pocket for these things. And the likelihood is, even if you have insurance, unless you have like a gold, Cadillac plan, you're probably paying out of pocket for all those services anyway. So he talks about that. Again, another instance of John making an emotional plea, trying to take a rare circumstance, paint it as the norm, while taking normal circumstances and painting them as rare. This is the manipulation that his audience is not bright enough to figure out that is being done to them. So then he cites the fact that the UK, and this is like one of these things he's talking about, the wonders of nationalized healthcare other places. These are the examples he gives. One, that the UK did a 4-minute celebration of the NHS as part of its opening ceremony for the Olympics in 2012, I think that was. And who exactly does he think was making that decision? Does he think that was voted on by the British populace or by the United Kingdom residents? No, this was put together by the same asshats in government who love NHS to begin with. And they, of course, were involved in the Olympic Committee. And, of course, they pushed their very own propaganda of how wonderful their nationalized healthcare system is. And they gave a 4-minute celebration of it featuring tap dancing doctors and like nurses on stripper poles. No, that was a Snoop Dogg concert. That's a different thing entirely. But it's not because the citizenry are all this wonderfully satisfied by the nationalized healthcare there. There is a fair amount of approval there for it. Don't get me wrong. It's not like entirely terrible, but that approval has waned over time as the system has become more and more strained. As a matter of fact, they even have in their hospitals, they have like these goals where they want to make sure that they see 95% of patients that walk in the door within 4 hours. That's their goal, is to maybe get to you within 4 hours of walking in the door at one of these facilities. those goals have not been reached, so much so they want to trash them because they know that they'll never reach them. As a matter of fact, they're going to get only farther and farther away from reaching them as time goes on, and again, as the system is more strained. Let's also not forget about the fact that we have a much better 5-year cancer survival rate here in the United States than in any of these nationalized healthcare systems. As a matter of fact, we have the best 5-year cancer survival rate in the world for a variety of cancers and many of the big ones that you hear, unfortunately, about all the time. And the wait times have increased so much in the UK, as I mentioned before, that they are now nixing their very own standards that they set up because they know that they're never going to be able to achieve them. And again, it's only getting worse from here. Then he provides a similar example about the Canadian healthcare system, and his example was, and I shit you not, is that the Canadian Medicare founder, the guy who created Canadian Medicare, was named the greatest Canadian of all time in 2004. Yeah. That was 16 years ago. Meanwhile, although Medicare is, again, fairly popular amongst our neighbors to the north, they are also still very concerned about it, as shown in a 2019 poll that I will have in the show notes for you. It states that the number one concern amongst Canadians, who I'm told have this wonderful healthcare system that we should all envy and want to replicate, 53% of Canadians are concerned most about their healthcare. Then from there, it breaks down things that people are concerned about. 45% is the economy, 43% climate change, 39% political corruption, 38% taxes. So the only thing that more than half of Canadians are worried about is their healthcare system. And for some reason, and I just thought this was worth note, is that 25% of them are worried about U.S. politics. Let us know when we elect a national leader who sings Deo in blackface on the weekends, and then we can have a conversation about our choice in leaders. Thank you very much. I do have to say that Prime Minister Justin Bieber does have a tremendous Ramadan sock collection. And that brings us to John's third criticism, or at least the third criticism about Medicare for All that John addresses, and that's choice. And he talks about how our current system limits our options, and yes, he's correct, again, sort of. Your current healthcare, your current health insurance, I should say, probably does have a network which limits your choices quite a bit. But there are currently other options. So let's say you work for a company, they have health insurance provided through the company, you're in a network, you can't use any doctor you want, but they give you a network of doctors that you'd like to be able to use. If you don't like that health insurance, you can change jobs. You can also opt out of their health insurance and pay for it privately. You don't have that option when there's only one health insurance company and it just so happens to be the government. Also, if you have insurance, even just in general, and you don't like let's say it's not through your employer, you could just switch plans to another carrier who will have a different network that may very well include the doctors and or specialists that you want to see. Once more, no such option will exist under Medicare for All. Now, granted, supposedly everybody would be in network, but what they don't tell you is that while, yes, the doctor closest to you will be in network, that doctor will also be in network for everybody who lives near you. So you may go to your doctor that you wanted so badly, but guess what? That doctor is now in everybody's network, including everybody who lives in your town and the neighboring towns for that matter. So you'll be going to get your care, but you'll be waiting in line because now everybody has access to every doctor all the time, and the better doctors are going to see more frequent visitation from people, and for that matter, get more patients to come in there, which means there will be even longer wait times for the quality care. That is, of course, unless you work out some backdoor deal with your doctor where it's like, hey, doc, throw me to the front of the line. Here's a couple extra bill nugs. You go ahead and take care of me. I'll take care of you, chief. And I thought that this whole thing was about providing the same level of healthcare for everybody. But again, it's only going to ultimately benefit the rich because that's just what happens. Like, the rich have access to things the rest of us don't have access to. Some people are bitter about it. Some people try to achieve it. I happen to be in the latter group. Will I ever? I don't know. But I'm not going to sit around and complain about people enjoying the money that they've earned. That's insane. I, too, hope to earn enough money to be able to enjoy it and have good health care and be able to, afford my kids college and buy her a car, whatever the case may be. I'm not going to fault people. Again, I said last week, I don't believe in enough money. I believe in your willingness to work for money, and if you work for it, you're entitled to as much of it as you can possibly earn as far as I'm concerned. Now, getting back into employer-based healthcare, again, if you work for a company that's providing you healthcare, more importantly, if you're in a union, that union has spent a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of your dues towards negotiating the best possible plan that they could get for not only you but all of your coworkers. Guess what happens to that when President Sanders takes the throne? Yeah, all of it goes away permanently. All private healthcare gone. All employer-based healthcare gone. All of the things that you paid for, that union representatives negotiated on your behalf, it may very well be very, very good healthcare coverage, as is usually the case if you work within a union. Now, gone, no options, and what will in all likelihood be a decrease in quality of health insurance for you. And yet again, I want to reiterate just how inefficient everything the government does tends to be. See any program run by government. Anyone. Pick one. It's run terribly and in all likelihood could be replicated far more efficiently in the private sector, as is almost always the case. I can't even think of an example other than the military. And the only reason that we don't do the military privately, although there obviously are private military contractors out there, but the only reason we don't do that is because if you could fund a private military, you could potentially take over the government. So our government is left with the task of assembling a military for us, and that's one of the only reasons that that's done that way. Otherwise, I assure you, even the military could be improved upon if done through private organizations. But then he goes on to provide a scenario where a woman had to go to a hospital for care, but she couldn't go to the nearest hospital, nor could she afford an ambulance. Now, what evidence does John provide that will show that Medicare for All would improve all of this? I mean, again, some anecdotal and emotional arguments. Yes, you may be able to go to the closest hospital, but again, so will everybody within driving distance of that hospital. Guess what you'll be doing when you get there? If you said waiting in line, you have been paying attention. Mind you, this also removes any choice, once again, for which medical services you can opt not to pay for, like abortion, sex changes, dental, vision, birth control, all of that sort of stuff. You'll be paying for all of it, even if those treatments don't align with your religious values, your moral beliefs, even if those services don't comport with your biological state. I'm a dude. I shouldn't be paying for pap smears and birth control pills. It just shouldn't be. I'm a guy. I'll never, ever use those services ever, and despite what they tell you in the media, I will never need them, nor will any man ever need them, regardless of what they might think that they are, despite the evidence between their legs. Then John goes on and he gives the examples of women, of this particular woman. She has 13% heart function and she has diabetes, and because of financial struggles, she has to choose which to buy the medication for. Now, first and foremost, this is a terrible situation. My heart bleeds for this woman. It really does. I feel terrible for these sorts of people. Like, I think when I get talking about this sort of stuff, people are, oh, you are a heartless monster. No. I'm not looking at people as individual people, and I know that sounds terrible, but overall, you cannot govern to the individual. You have to govern to the body, the corpus of the population that is in front of you. I have to, if I'm the president, hypothetically, right, I have to govern for 320 million people. Might some of them have it slightly harder if I have to make certain decisions? Yes, but at the end of the day, you're never going to satisfy 320 million people. There are always going to be people who are left on the outside. There's always going to be people who feel like they get less than. And there's always going to be people who look at other people as if they got more than. You will never, ever satisfy everyone, ever. Democrats, get that through your heads, and then maybe you could come back to reality and provide some policy proposals that may actually help the country in some way, shape, or form, rather than, forcing the Republicans, people like myself, to constantly waste all of our energy on combating your stupid. We could all get together and be on the same page and achieve the same goals that we both have if one of us was able to actually look past their emotions for more than a second, which you've made it very clear you are not capable of doing. So this woman, like I said, she's got to choose between her heart medication and her diabetes medication. Now, the first thing that jumps out to me, and I only really saw her on the screen for like a minute, but the first thing that jumps out to me is that these are probably conditions as the result of life choices. Now, if these are natural conditions that she was born with, my apologies. The likelihood is that's not the case. So let's assume for a second that she isn't born with a heart condition, isn't born with diabetes, and that these were the result of unhealthy lifestyle choices. Should we be paying for that? Was she aware of not only the possible negative health effects of those choices, but also of the potential financial burden that could result from making those choices? I would imagine so, and yet she made those decisions anyway. Now, is she going to make better decisions once she knows that she's not going to have to pay for her medical care? Or is she going to make worse decisions because the financial burden will never roll back on her in the way that it should in a just world? But, here she is. Again, maybe she was born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. I don't know. But there's plenty of reasons why the centralization, the nationalization of healthcare is going to ultimately lead to poor health decisions, or conversely, the government cracking down on what you can eat, what you can drink, what you could smoke, what you can do. Look at fucking Bloomberg is running for president. This guy took sodas out of people's hands because he didn't think that people should be drinking soda. Now, should people be drinking soda? No, but that's their decision to make. It's not really, it provides no nutritional value whatsoever, but that's not Mike Bloomberg's decision. That's yours. Because currently, if you drink enough soda to where you get diabetes, guess who pays for those healthcare costs? You. Not me. Not John Oliver. Not, whoever. You pay for it because you made the mistake. It's your body. It's your health insurance. It's your health care. You cover the tab. That will not be the case under Medicare-For-All. And people make really dumb decisions now. Imagine when they're free of the financial burden of the ramifications of those dumb decisions. So those are the three main criticisms that John Oliver points out. Now let's bring you some reality. And this is something I've said often. If you listen to Ben Shapiro, he talks about this all the time because he's 100% correct about it. There are three possible things that we could want from our healthcare: universality, affordability, and quality. Universality. How many people are covered? How can we get as many people covered as possible? That's one goal. Affordability. How can we get the prices as low as possible? That's another goal. Quality. How can we achieve the best possible care? That's a noble goal. Now, as is the case with virtually all things, you cannot have more than two of the three in this particular scenario. You can have affordability and quality, but you're not going to be able to cover everybody. You can have universality and affordability, but you can't have quality. And you can have quality and universality, but it's going to be remarkably expensive to cover everybody with quality healthcare. Now, what Medicare-For-All does is it tends to focus more on those first two things, but because it's focused on those two things, it can never, ever achieve the third. Furthermore, it actually appears that while their coverage does cover everybody achieving the goal of universality, it really isn't going to be all that affordable, so it really is only accomplishing one of the three goals. Also, even though everybody, quote, has coverage, what does that really mean? I mean, yes, you're going to be paying for it through your taxes. Your taxes are inevitably going to go up as a result of this, but more importantly than that, if you're waiting in long lines for care, that's time that you're away from work, away from family, away from kids. There's a financial cost, there's an emotional cost to that. Also, we talked about creating a kind of a buffer there, right? John Oliver even talked about it. We've got to lower prices, but we can't lower them so low as to not motivate people to innovate and to come up with better ways of being more efficient and providing more healthcare for less money or for better quality. That goes away if you start reducing the profit motive for pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, doctors. Doctors are already looking at like $500,000 in student debt, which I guess Bernie and Elizabeth Warren are going to waive anyway, but hypothetically, let's say they're unable to do that because they won't be able to do that because you can't do that. But let's say, hypothetically, they don't get that done, but they try to pass Medicare-For-All. Now your doctor, who is working on razor-thin margins as far as operating costs and any sort of profit that they might be getting from their medical practice, looking at $500,000 in student debt, it's going to take a long time for them to chip away at that, and that's also going to open the door for doctors to create arrangements with some of their wealthier clients to get some money off the books in order to provide them with better, better, faster care, or care that is on demand to them, essentially, whereas the rest of us will wait in an even longer line while the wealthy are taken care of. And I mentioned this already, but I'll mention it one more time, is that if the pharmaceutical companies aren't motivated to innovate because you've removed their profit motive, as a matter of fact, you've probably removed enough of their revenue overall to where they no longer have the money to do any sort of research and development to be able to provide maybe better drugs at a lower cost, all of that goes away because now the grand old government is in charge of everything. And as I've expressed throughout the course of this podcast, they are remarkably inefficient at everything. So it actually leaves us none of those three things, right? Medicare for All, it aims to provide universality. Actually, it aims to provide all three, which is an impossibility, as is the case with virtually anything, right? It's not as if everything could be free and widely available and top quality. Like, name anything that's like that. Air isn't even like that. Water isn't even like that. But they think medical care, which requires an exorbitant amount of labor just to achieve the status of doctor or nurse even, now you've got to build all that up. You got to spend all that time in school, spend all that money on college, and now you're going to get to the profession where you thought you'd be helping people, yes, but also making a fair amount of money for all of the labor that you've put in without ever receiving a dollar back before the first day of your job starts. This will, in all likelihood, also disincentivize the best and brightest amongst us from being doctors in the first place. They'll be lawyers, or they'll be, business majors, or whatever they can do outside of that field that costs a lot less money to earn the degree and makes a lot more money in the private sector. So that's really it. The Medicare for All, it tries to achieve all of those goals. It doesn't achieve a single one of them, which is precisely why it's a terrible idea for our country. But even like I said, even if hypothetically it could achieve two of those things, it could never achieve the third. So we can cover everybody, we can make it cheap, but it's not going to be good quality, as is, again, the case. Think of any other good. It would if you can make it widely available and cheap, when is it ever good quality? You're talking about things that you find in a dollar store, right? You want that to be your Medicare? I didn't think so. You can make it widely available and you can make it quality, but you're not going to be able to provide high-quality healthcare to everybody and still keep it cheap. It's not like supply and demand, right? Like it's got like an inelastic demand. Is that what it is? My macro and microeconomics classes are much in my rearview mirror, but it has an inelastic demand, from what I understand. Is that basically? I mean, it's not subject to the same rules as supply and demand because there's always a demand. Everybody needs healthcare. Everybody needs it. Now, that doesn't make it a right, but everybody needs it. Same way everybody needs air, everybody needs water, everybody needs food, everybody needs shelter. None of those things are guaranteed to you other than, I guess, maybe air, because there's like, who's going to stop you from having it? But, and then the last option there, we can make it affordable, we can make it quality, but that is not going to make it easy for everybody to have access to, and really because of my solution to all of this. So again, you cannot achieve all three of those things. My goal, if I were looking at those three potential things that you want from healthcare, I'm going with 2 and 3. I'm going with affordability and I'm going with quality. Now, why universality? Because I'm not necessarily worried with the number of people that are covered if they're going to be covered by plans that aren't really covering them in the first place, as I talked about at the beginning. I'm going for affordability and I'm going for quality. And the way that I'm going to achieve that, it's actually a fairly simple solution. And for those of you who've heard me talk about this in the past, my apologies, but underwriting. Every other type of insurance requires some level of underwriting. If you go to get car insurance, they evaluate your driving record, they get your age, they get your sex, they get, things that are going to play into your likelihood of requiring the coverage that you're paying for. Same goes for life insurance. They're going to evaluate your mortality rate. How likely are you to die in the next 10 years, 20 years before you turn age 100? Depends on what kind of insurance that you're applying for, but you give them a wealth of information in order for them to analyze the likelihood of your early demise, and if you are likely to get an early demise, you don't get the coverage. That is what I would suggest as far as health insurance goes. Now, I know pre-existing condition people out there are going to kick and scream, and yes, I would love to find a way to cover people with pre-existing conditions. The problem is that very notion spits in the face of the idea of insurance in general, right? I'm a big stand-up comedian guy. I love watching stand-up specials. I think they're the modern day philosophers, to be honest with you. I think like our stand-up comedians, because they're so bold and they say things, or at least they used to say things that were kind of outside the box, right? It would make you think. You would say the things that you wouldn't say out loud. One time, and I forget who it was it may have been, I don't even want to put a name to this because I'm going to be so woefully wrong, but it was a stand-up comedian who was talking about insurance, and he's like, they should just call it in case shit, because it's literally there in case shit happens. Now, if you know definitively that something is going to happen, it makes it very difficult for me to calculate a premium as far as what you should be paying, right? So if you have a health condition, there is a 100% certainty you're going to require medical care. There is a 100% certainty, depending on the condition, that care may cost an exorbitant amount of money. So in order for me to charge you an appropriate premium, I'm going to have to charge you an exorbitant amount of money for your health insurance. Now, what I'd like to do is institute underwriting. Get people into the system at a young age while they're young and healthy, get an understanding. Basically, health insurance now they really ask for is your age, your sex, whether or not you smoke, maybe what state you live in, which could have something to do with your morbidity rate, which is the likelihood that you'll be sick or get into an accident. Okay, let's go to full-scale underwriting for health insurance. Again, get people in young. It incentivizes people to get in young because much like with life insurance, if you're young, the likelihood is that you're not going to die anytime soon. Same thing goes for your morbidity. The likelihood is you're not going to get sick anytime soon. Now, obviously, shit happens, right? Well, that's why you bought yourself some in-case shit, otherwise known as insurance, in case shit happens. And frankly, even on the health insurance thing, they ask whether or not you're a smoker, but they don't test you. They don't do a piss test or a blood test. You could lie if you really wanted to and you were willing to roll the dice. Now, the problem there arises that if you do require medical care and they realize that you're a smoker, they can nail you for insurance fraud. So be careful on that. But, technically speaking, and I'm not advising anyone to do this because I am a licensed health insurance agent, don't do that. But you could do it, and there would really be none the wiser unless, of course, you needed some sort of medical procedure. So, again, I want to propose full underwriting. Let's get all of your medical stats. Let's get your age, your weight, your height, your habits, your diet. Let's get as much information as we can possibly get, calculate a morbidity rate, and the insurance company can then charge you an appropriate premium based on your likelihood of requiring care, which is precisely what insurance is all about. Now, it's not going to be available to everybody if we do it this way, but for the people it is available for, it will be affordable and it will be quality because it will be customized to you to a certain extent. It will also be affordable because they'll know exactly. You're not paying for the likelihood of a pool of people. You're not paying for a likelihood of your family. You're paying for the likelihood that you will need medical insurance. And if you eat right, and if you diet and you exercise and all the good stuff that you could do, you take your vitamins, you say your prayers, you slam 900-pound giants in the Silver Dome, brother. You can do, it's another Hulk Hogan reference. I'm going to try and sneak one in every week. You can achieve good health and reduce your risk of needing medical care. Now, again, there's accidents, there's random things, there's natural born conditions, all this sort of stuff. That's where charity comes in, as far as I'm concerned. So, I gave you the complaints. John Oliver's talking about all the complaints. I told you why those complaints are valid. I gave you goals that you can potentially strive towards when implementing a healthcare plan. I told you which of those I think are most important and how Medicare-For-All falls short on all of them. And then I gave you my solution as to how to solve the cost of health insurance. First and foremost, I think we need to get health insurance to the point to where it's actually helping out people instead of just being a monthly bill that is providing an umbrella of coverage that you'll never actually need. I think, honestly, I want less insurance in the health insurance in the healthcare industry. I would like to be able to negotiate with my doctor what I pay, as opposed to asking a third middleman to do so, and they always end up somehow getting a better rate anyway because they obviously are negotiating on behalf of a litany of people. But in a situation where that wasn't the case, I would be able to talk to my doctor, who hopefully has actually got my best interest in heart, And instead of charging me $85 to take some earwax out of my ear, which is a legitimate thing that happened to me one time, we could talk about it. He can explain to me, you got this earwax in your ear. I could go in and get it for $85, or I can explain to you how to go get it yourself, because it's really not that big a deal. And it's most certainly not a surgery, but that is precisely how the insurance registers it, because a tool went into a orifice in my body. Henceforth, it is considered a surgery. This is the type of malarkey that exists in the insurance industry. Oh my God, I just said malarkey in full context, and I wasn't even being ironic or making fun of Joe Biden, but this is the type of malarkey that exists in the insurance industry, because healthcare coverage is one thing, and then the insurance is the weird shroud that covers over it. And if you want to give government control of that shroud that controls the healthcare that you get, you're just dumb. There's really no better way of putting it. You're not a very bright person if you want to give the government control of anything, but more specifically your healthcare. Death panels, people. Bloomberg was specifically talking about death panels. We were told this would never be a thing. We were told that other nationalized countries don't have these sorts of things, and yet there have been stories in the recent past where babies weren't even allowed to leave the country to seek healthcare elsewhere. There was the big case of the kid in England. Oh man, I can't remember his name at the moment, but they were trying to get NHS to just allow the parents to leave the country with this child so that they could go get him medical care in a place that doesn't suck so much. Here, of course. And they weren't even allowing them to do that. So not only are you not going to have any choice, you're not even going to have the choice to leave and get outside of the walls of this country and go find other choices outside of here, in all likelihood, if in fact Medicare for All ends up being anything like the NHS. So I've gone long. This has been a long episode. I'm more or less done at this point. I just want to say one last time to Mr. John Oliver, I'm sorry, buddy, but your fact-averse Medicare-For-All assessment is one of the funnier things on your not-so-funny show, as it was just laughably incorrect from top to bottom, which is precisely what you get when you have a comedian trying to be a policy wonk, as we've seen in the recent past with people like Jimmy Kimmel and whoever the hell else, Stephen Colbert. See, I almost forgot he existed. That's how long it's been since I've actually watched him or paid any attention to him. But we are done here. And I thank you all for staying tuned. This episode went a lot longer than I was thinking. I'm very happy I didn't decide to throw a bunch of other topics in here, but I thought this one was important because, look, it's going to be Bernie or Bloomberg, both of which want to implement stuff like this. So from now on, it is an all-out assault on Medicare for All, and any of the jabronis out there who think that this is a good idea, and that starts with you, Mr. Oliver, first and foremost, and it will trickle its way down to whatever is left of the doldrums of the Democratic Party by the time they get to actually nominating Hillary Clinton again, because that's becoming more and more likely in my head, even though it seems like it's less and less likely. But as this field dwindles down and that moderate lane remains open, because Biden's left it wide open, and Bloomberg, frankly, I don't think has the charisma to carry it. Not that I think Hillary Clinton does, but Amy Klobuchar most certainly doesn't. So I would think if we end up with a brokered convention heading into Milwaukee, the possibility of Hillary Clinton reemerging as the candidate again, it's there, it's possible. And maybe she would be smart enough to say, let's pump the brakes on this Medicare for All thing. Obamacare didn't go so well. And her plan, if I'm not mistaken, was sort of a slide from Obamacare to Medicare for All, but was not the leap that Bernie and Warren are making. So maybe that does leave that moderate lane open for old Hill Dog. God, let's hope so. I would love to watch Trump trounce her all over again, and in more spectacular fashion than ever before. But I've said we're done, and I keep talking. Find me right here on therightopinion.podbean.com. Also iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Also check out hackerhameen.podbean.com and ratsaladreview.com, other platforms that share this fine podcast, and we appreciate the hell out of them for doing so. Check me out on Twitter at RightOpinionPod, also on Instagram at RightOpinionPod. Email the show, therightopinionpod@gmail.com. And there's a merch store. Check it out in the show notes. I think it's a TeePublic site. Just put up a new shirt. Incredulous Boomer Rube for Trump. And I hope you guys are incredulous boomer rubes, as apparently I am, and you all go out there and buy the shirt. I believe it's on sale currently. I think it's on sale for like the first week. So if you catch it now, it's like less than $20, although shipping is a little expensive. So definitely hop on that sooner rather than later. The link will be in the show notes, along with the link to this John Oliver malarkey for all of your, I guess, listening displeasure. But thank you again for tuning in right here to therightopinion.podbean.com. I have been your host, Harrison Bergeron, reminding you that opinions, they're like assholes. Everybody's got one, but this asshole has the right opinion, and you can only get it right here on therightopinion.podbean.com. Peace.